The principle of restraint is recognized in common law and upheld by the Supreme Court of Canada.
So I'll take that
there
as a
are
no.
challenges
Thank you,
with
Minister.
it, and we will be making changes.
Thank you, Minister. Last month, in response to the Conservative announcement of the Stand on Guard policy, you tweeted out, quote, "This isn't the Wild West, it's Canada." Around the same time that you tweeted out this tone-deaf statement, in Hamilton alone, more than 80 shots rang out.
Do you really fail to see how allowing private prosecutions for hate offences without the Attorney General's consent could be weaponized against innocent Canadians?
Building off of Mr. Baber's points about the lower threshold for the definition of speech, there is, under this law, assuming Bill C-9 passes, something that might not be legal to say today on the Internet. Or it might be legal to say on the Internet, could actually be illegal in the future under C-9, could it not?
No likelihood it would come up in that set of circumstances, I think, would be quite small.
You're basically talking about tacking on criminal charges on what is otherwise civil, non-criminal behavior. This is very concerning.
Sure to hear this.
Is it a point of order?
It's a procedural point of order, yes. We are concerned about the minister's earlier testimony to Mr. Housefather. He seemed to have relayed testimony that would have been taken in camera.
This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
Welcome, Minister. Welcome, guests. Appearing today, we have with us the Minister of Justice, the Honourable Sean Fraser.
Thank you, Chair. Minister Fraser, Justice officials, welcome to Justice Committee. Minister, since your government took office in 2015, crime in this country has been spiraling out of control. Violent crime up 55%, homicides up 30%, sex assaults up 76%, gun crime up 130%, and extortion shockingly up 330%. And yet, over the last 570 days, your government has only introduced 2 justice bills, C-63 and C-9, neither of which do anything to address the revolving door for violent repeat offenders. Why, Minister, after a year and a half, is your first legislative priority a bill that restricts free speech instead of protecting Canadians from violent repeat offenders?
Mr. Chair, with enormous respect to my colleague, I view the question to diminish the importance of the legislation that we're here to discuss today. Treating hate crimes as something less than urgent when members of affected communities are experiencing painful realities as a result of the hate that is lobbied upon them is not, in my view, the appropriate way to engage in this conversation. For the members' information, as we've discussed privately, we expect this fall, granted I've been in this position for a matter of a few months, most of which the House wasn't sitting, but this fall we have tabled the legislation we're here to discuss today. Within a matter of weeks, we will have one of the most comprehensive sets of reforms when it comes to the bail system and tougher sentences that our country has seen in many years, and a third bill before Christmas regarding intimate partner violence, sexual offences, and the role of victims in this process. Thank you, Minister. I'm taking back my time.
Mr. Brock, I understand that the Minister should be succinct in his answers, but just let him finish his thought.
Yes, I'm taking a look at the time it took me to pose the question, sir, and I've given him actually an extra 10 seconds to respond.
Go ahead.
Do I have my time?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Minister, in 2015, there were 382,000 incidents of violent crime. In 2024, there were almost 592,000. That's a 55% increase. Any way you slice it, Minister, is an objective fact that crime is worse now than it was in 2015. Are you willing to accept reality, or are you going to choose to remain oblivious to what's happening in this country?
Look, I can recognize that crime and violent crime is a problem in Canada. That's why we are moving forward with an ambitious legislative agenda that's going to toughen the criminal justice system. But it's important that we realize that there are additional solutions. In addition to our changes to the bail and sentencing regime that you'll see in a matter of weeks, you're also going to see investments in the front line with 1,000 new RCMP officers, 1,000 new border officials, and more prosecutors. But we also have a view of the long-term need to prevent crime by making investments upstream that will tackle opportunities to pull at-risk youth out of the system, to invest in supportive housing, and to deal with mental health and addictions. But I think it's clear that we need to take action to toughen Canada's criminal laws to punish people who commit serious crimes.
Minister, Conservatives have introduced nearly 20 justice and public safety bills this Parliament alone on bail reform, sex assault, intimate partner violence, and organized crime, amongst others, while your government has tabled just 2. Are you going to support any private member bills introduced by the Conservative Party?
We don't have a blanket rule on supporting or rejecting bills based on the source of those proposed legal changes. We instead consider independently each of the measures that are brought forward by members, regardless of which party they may come from. I've had productive conversations, not only with you as my critic, Mr. Brock, with our colleague, Mr. Caputo, as well, and I'm willing to work in good faith. If there are certain challenges that cause us to believe that the proposed reforms will not make communities safe or would be blatantly unconstitutional,
Thank you, Minister.
I will have challenges.
Thank you, Minister. Will you commit today to repealing the principle of restraint under Section 493.1 of the Criminal Code to stop repeat violent offenders from being released back onto our streets? Yes or no?
You should expect to see changes to the way the principle of restraint is codified in the criminal code. I would point out that a repeal of the principle is not necessarily the appropriate language, given that the principle of restraint is recognized in common law and upheld by the Supreme Court of Canada.
So I'll take that as a no. Thank you, Minister.
With it, and we will be making changes.
Thank you, Minister. Last month, in response to the Conservative announcement of the Stand on Guard policy, you tweeted out, quote, "This isn't the Wild West, it's Canada." Around the same time that you tweeted out this tone-deaf statement, in Hamilton alone, more than 80 shots rang out at bars after they were closing, leaving 3 injured. In Toronto, a 19-year-old was shot and killed in a mall bathroom. 2 17-year-olds were charged. In Ottawa, a Jewish woman in her 70s was stabbed and sent to hospital just for being Jewish. In Calling Lake, Alberta, a man wanted on a Canada-wide arrest warrant was charged in a violent home invasion where the homeowner was shot and killed. If these and thousands of other crime stories that are happening around this country on a weekly basis aren't indicative of the Wild West, what would meet your definition, sir?
This is an important conversation. Canadians should know that they have the right to defend themselves under the law in their homes if they are faced with such circumstances as you've described. And they have the ability to use force to do so when it is reasonably necessary. Jurisdictions that have adopted the proposal that you've suggested have not become more safe and have created new dangers. And just a few weeks ago in Texas, there was a 12-year-old boy killed by someone who thought he might have been an invader when he was playing Nicky Nicky Nine Door. You hear stories about people who are mistaken for invaders, who are delivering packages. What we're saying is where there is a set of circumstances that is unreasonable, the police should be able to make an independent decision. The law that was put in place by Stephen Harper, and it's a law that I actually support. You have the right to defend yourself in your home. I would remind colleagues that we have an opportunity to discuss the hate legislation that we brought forward. I hope subsequent questioners will take that issue as seriously as the government does.
Last year, at my request, this committee, and Mr. Brock was there at the time, so Monsieur Fortin était là aussi, we did a study that was called Heightened Anti-Semitism in Canada and How to Confront It, that came forward with many recommendations, some of which are included in the bill. For example, Minister, you're aware of the study on anti-Semitism the Justice Committee did last year?
Yes, I am.
So recommendation 10, that the federal government, that the federal parliament consider creating a new intimidation offense under the criminal code to more clearly and directly protect entrance to and exit from community buildings and worship and houses of worship and community centers, in addition to existing offenses that may apply in situations where such buildings are being blocked. Mr. Minister, is that in the bill?
It is, and I would note that recommendation had multi-partisan support, including from the Conservative Party.
And then recommendation 15, and in addition, you've also added an obstruction offense in addition to the intimidation offense that the committee had recommended. Recommendation 15, that the government of Canada consider removing the requirement to obtain the consent of the provincial attorney general in order to prosecute certain hate crimes. Mr. Minister, is that in the bill?
Yes, again, that recommendation was supported by multiple parties, including the Liberal and Conservative parties.
Recommendation 16, that the Government of Canada take steps to ban the display of symbols of terrorist organizations that are listed under the Criminal Code. Mr. Minister, is that in the bill?
At risk of repeating myself, it's in the bill. And again, I reviewed the recommendation with sincerity and realized it had multi-partisan support at the time. I'm disappointed to see the tune has changed.
Recommendation 17, that the Government of Canada work with police forces across the country to develop a standardized definition of hate crimes and hate incident. The standardized definition of hate that was essentially referred to in that recommendation, essentially is in the bill as well, is it not, coming from Supreme Court jurisprudence?
Absolutely.
So looking at the fact that for the last period of time, there's been a lot of people, myself included, that have criticized the words that have come out and a failure to act, is this bill not exactly what was being requested in terms of actually acting in terms of what the federal government can do within our own jurisdiction to respond to the incredibly high rise of anti-Semitism and other forms of hate in the country?
Certainly. That was a major motivator to take action in the first place. And I should say, Mr. Housefather, thank you for your work on the committee and more broadly to advance measures that would combat hate in our communities. The process of developing this legislation relied heavily upon the work of parliamentarians from different parties to inform the final version of the bill. We did not seek to turn this into a partisan affair. My hope was this would cruise through the parliamentary process with support of all parties in the House. I still hope we can get to a place where that remains the case.
I certainly do too. Minister, I want to ask you something that's part of the bill but a bit auxiliary to it, which is the fact that in this country there's different jurisdictional issues which the committee ran into when we were doing this report, and que le Bloc québécois a soulevé à multiples.
The Bloc québécois raised on a number of occasions. It's a provincial area of jurisdiction.
Many of the issues that have preoccupied people, the demonstrations that have happened, including demonstrations on October the 7th, in Toronto and Montreal, shutting down Concordia University, involved what many believe to be disrespectful actions versus necessarily illegal ones. You said something very, I thought, apropos at your press conference about setting a tone from the top about what this country expects versus what is illegal. But politicians have to set a tone, and what we don't think is Canadian is our values. Could you sort of repeat a little bit about what you said at that press conference?
Certainly. Canadians want to see leadership when it comes to treating one another equally. And Canadians want to see leadership when it comes to combating hate in our communities. We wanted to play a leadership role by introducing legislation that would criminalize behavior that crosses a high degree of moral culpability, that threshold that brings something into the criminal context. But we should similarly recognize that there are many acts that we may find offensive that do not constitute hate for the purpose of the criminal code. We should nevertheless endeavor to condemn those acts, because the impact that a failure to speak out against hate takes in our communities is still a negative impact that our fellow Canadians feel. We need to demonstrate leadership through our legislative action, but also in our words and in our deeds when it comes to condemning acts of hate or discrimination whenever they take place. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us, regardless of party, to speak out and to advance measures formally and informally that will have that impact, demonstrating that all Canadians belong in this country.
And I think one of the frustrations has been that existing laws have not been enforced by municipal police, by those authorities on the ground. And the point has been made that, well, the federal government should tell them to enforce the existing law. But of course, the federal government has no power or jurisdiction to tell local police how to operate operationally on the ground in our cities, whether it's Toronto, Montreal, or elsewhere. But do you not believe that this law is sending a signal to provinces and municipalities and police as to what the federal government is expecting in terms of a tone from the top and in terms of enforcing the law?
It does two things. It both sets the tone, as you've indicated, but in addition, it also makes it technically easier for police to do their job when it comes to laying charges by providing clarity in the definition and removing the procedural step of requiring the consent of the Provincial Attorney General, both of which will add to the tone-setting exercise the bill may represent by actually making it technically easier to lay charges in the real world.
Thank you so much.
Sir, I represent one of the largest Jewish communities in the country, to which I also belong. Over the last decade of the Liberal government, hate crimes against the Jewish community have more than quadrupled. I believe that your appearance today is evidence of your government's failure to protect the Jewish community. To add betrayal to injury, the Prime Minister rewarded the worst terrorist attack in our lifetime with the recognition of a terrorist state. So please don't pretend that you're doing us any favors. But what I am seeing is that unless Bill C-9 is amended, it will criminalize and prosecute speech that isn't criminal right now. So let's get into it. For 35 years, we used the Supreme Court definition of hatred from a case named Keekstra. It is an emotion of intense and extreme nature that is clearly associated with vilification and detestation. You say that you're trying to codify the Supreme Court jurisprudence, but your definition that you propose in Bill C-9 is the emotion that involves detestation or vilification and that is stronger than disdain or dislike. You removed the words intense and extreme nature from the Supreme Court definition. Why are you trying to lower the bar to charge and convict people of hate speech? Is it to criminalize speech that liberals don't like?
No, and I'm just curious, in the preamble to your question, you indicated that there is additional hate speech that may not be criminal. And I'm curious, is there certain examples of hate speech that you think should not be criminal?
No, I'm saying that we have a clear definition of hate speech from the Supreme Court, definition that your government is trying to dilute through Bill C-9. Why are you diluting this definition by eliminating the words of an extreme and intense nature?
So when I review the definition of hatred, not just in the Keekstra, but the Whatcott decision as well, it's clear to me that vilification and detestation are extreme manifestations. To the extent that you have a different interpretation, know that the intent of the legislation was, in fact, to codify not only those specific sentences in the decisions, but the different factors that the courts would have used over the years to identify. Should the committee feel that the legislation would benefit from a different reflection of the test that the Supreme Court has laid out, do know that that would not be a deal breaker for me, particularly if it would earn multi-partisan support and send a signal to Canadians that all parliamentarians want to combat hate in their communities. This was not an attempt to dilute the definition. It was an attempt to make good on the spirit of that definition and provide clarity to law enforcement.
It is doing exactly that. And in fact, the court in Whatcott has referred and reaffirmed the definition of Keekstra. I'm scared that you're going to use your proposed definition against Canadians and against members of the Jewish community. Your proposed definition is so broad, ill-considered by the courts, that it's probably unconstitutional. But should Canadians expect, like in the videos we're seeing out of the UK, that police are going to be knocking on their doors in the middle of the night for a Facebook comment?
Absolutely not, and I think the suggestion is patently far-fetched on the face of it.
All right. Bill C-9 will remove the requirement for the consent for the Attorney General to prosecute hate speech. The previous Attorney General said that the consent is a required safeguard. I heard your position during debate that in the future you may have a political Attorney General who will withhold consent to lay hate charges. But if the Attorney General can be political, then certainly a Crown Attorney can also be political, and a police force or a police officer can be political, and their judgment could be clouded politically, and they can potentially bring hate charges when it isn't appropriate and ruin someone's life. Have you considered that?
I've considered many aspects of this, and I like to start with the problem that we're trying to solve. We heard loud and clear from affected communities that charges were not being laid and justice was not being served. Stakeholders and, in fact, the Justice Committee had, including multi-partisan support, including your own party, have supported this particular change. I also hold the view, in addition to the argument that you've put in place, that with the extensive body of case law that has emerged over decades that has been informed the actions of law enforcement, the additional safeguard that the AG consent once provided is not as necessary today as it would have been back then. Wanted to solve the problem to ensure it was easier to lay charges where law enforcement can apply the law independently when they see hate in their communities in an effort to stamp it out everywhere.
It will be especially easier with you diluting the definition of hatred, but what's even more scary is that private prosecutions will also be exempt from Attorney General consent. Now, yes, the Crown may withdraw or stay charges, but the complainant could appeal either the Justice of the Peace or the Crown's decision to stay the charges and drag an innocent person into divisional court on judicial review. Do you really fail to see how allowing private prosecutions for hate offenses without the Attorney General's consent could be weaponized against innocent Canadians, including members of the Jewish community?
Mr. Baber, the time's up. Perhaps one of your members can pick that question up later. Thank you. Mr. Chang.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, Burnaby Central is one of the most diverse communities in Canada. So in 2022, someone shouted at me at Metrotown Station. He said, and I quote, "What are you looking at, Asian? If you want to F-word, go to Davie Street." So as someone who has personally experienced discrimination based on my ethnic background and sexual orientation, I'm deeply concerned about the rise in hate crimes. However, I believe that it is equally important to ensure that Bill C-9 upholds and respects our charter rights. Minister, we have seen troubling rise in the hate-motivated incidents across Canada. Could you explain how Bill C-9 directly addressed the growing threat, and why now is the right time for this piece of legislation?
Look, thank you. I too take very seriously the need to protect the rights of Canadians, but I take a broader view of what that includes. And in my view, it should include the right to actually live freely in your community, not just to have rights ascribed to you on paper. When we see hate take place in our communities and choose not to take action, we are complicit in hate's continuous fomentation. And I, for one, don't think that's acceptable. The changes that we're making to the criminal law are going to add real protections for communities of faith going to their places of worship, their community centers, their schools, for people more broadly to know that there will be additional charges, specific crimes of hate, if they are in fact targeted on the basis of their race or their sexual orientation, and to know that they will actually have changes made to the law so they are not a paper victory, but are likely to lead to more charges, and in turn that deterrent effect will have fewer instances of hate play out in their communities. This is about changing the real world experience of people who should not be subjected to hate in this country, and I think it's incumbent on all of us to actually have that frame when we're adopting laws or considering what amendments we may propose to them.
Minister, we know that schools and youth spaces have increasingly become target of hate-related incidents. How will Bill C-9 help ensure that students, educators, teachers are protected from intimidation and hate?
So the bill it's really important. Although this conversation has largely played out around themes of protection of religious minorities, it has a much broader application. Schools that are designed for a particularly an identifiable group in Canada would certainly benefit from the protection on the intimidation and obstruction offences. But we also wanted to make sure that we capture hate more broadly, so that if someone is targeted, regardless of whether it is a school for a particular religious community, a particular community of interest, that you would nevertheless have the protection of the law where a criminal act is committed against a person on the basis of some immutable characteristic belonging to an entire group of people. This additional protection, whether it's in our schools, whether it's in our grocery stores, whether it's on our university campuses, is going to heighten the degree of protection that Canadians actually enjoy in their communities, no matter where they find themselves.
Thank you. La parole est à vous, Monsieur Fortin, 2 minutes et demie.
2.5 minutes, Mr. Fortin. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Minister, the Criminal Code states currently that the Attorney General needs to provide consent before prosecuting hate crimes. C9 will delete that prior consent. Could you please tell me what that previous prior consent, the purpose of was, and why delete it now?
At the time that the hate provisions were put in place, there were arguments made that formed their way into law that offered an additional degree of protection. The argument would have been to ensure that crimes had that second layer of approval before, in fact, charges were laid. In my view, given the fact the world has changed, the law has become clearer over many decades since the Keekser decision in particular, and law enforcement have gained experience, you no longer have that same need. We also, as a result of the rising prevalence of hate crimes in our communities, heard from communities more frequently that this is a problem that's getting in the way of charges actually being laid. I would make one final point, not to eat up your time, and if I need to extend by 30 seconds, I will. It's important to understand that provinces maintain the ability to implement pre-charge screening at their discretion should they wish. British Columbia, for example, does that for efficiency purposes. Other provinces could have the ability to do the same.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre.
Thank you, Minister. I'm not the only one to think this, but with this prior consent, I saw it as a guarantee that the prosecutions would be serious when it comes to hate propaganda. If it's deleted, this provision, won't it allow an individual to prosecute or sue frivolously when the Attorney General would not have given consent had he been obligated to do so?
So, and I think this touches on a question that one of the previous questioners put forward. I think it's important to keep in mind as well a difference between public Crown prosecutions and private prosecutions, there's a judicial screening process that will be in place to prevent the kind of frivolous or vexatious litigation that may exist. But when it comes to the Crown's application of the law, the law enforcement's application of the law in communities, I believe that they have the ability, based on the extensive body of case law, based on decades of experience, and based on training supports that are made available, to effectively police the laws as they're written on paper, so the outcomes we're seeking in communities can be fully realized by Canadians.
Temps est complet, Monsieur Fortin.
Time's up, Mr. Fortin. Well, I understand there's no good reason to delete that consent. It was useful. Well, I have a different point of view, but I understand yours.
Over you.
Minister, thank you for being with us today. C9 makes reference specifically with hate symbols to public spaces. Just to confirm, does that include the internet?
Generally speaking, the law will apply equally online as it does in real communities.
So this bill will affect what people can say and write on the internet?
Just in the limited circumstances where there is the willful promotion of hatred against
It will apply
someone.
to the internet. The internet is within the jurisdiction of...
It would be possible that someone could commit a hate crime on the internet, certainly.
So, building off of Mr. Baber's points about the lower threshold for the definition of speech, there is, under this law, assuming Bill C9 passes, something that might not be legal to say today on the internet. Or it might be legal to say on the internet, could actually be illegal in the future under C9, could it not?
No, that's entirely inaccurate, and I say that with no judgment to your perspective, but let me explain. The only circumstance where you could imagine some online comment attracting scrutiny under this law would attach to behavior that is criminal today but would be punished less severely. The symbols piece that you pointed to, for example, is attached only to the willful promotion of hate. This is not a blanket symbols ban. The willful promotion of hate is a crime today, but we want to recognize a distinct charge where that same behavior uses certain symbols of hate to bring a higher degree of culpability. So there is no new human behavior that would attract the scrutiny.
I understand, but I'm building off of the discussion earlier on the definition. Is your view that the change in wording, and there was a change in wording, you made a deliberate decision to change the definition that was spelled out in Keekstra and reaffirmed in Watcott. Is your view that your definition in C9 will not capture anything beyond what is currently captured right now by the hate definition?
The definition was an attempt to codify, and the reason
this is
that
the
there
yes
was
or no question, Minister. Is there at all a lower threshold or a broader net on hate in Canada after C9 if it passes?
My view on the definition question, because the offences I would give a different answer to you for, but on the definition, my view is that it codifies the same behaviour that is there today, and it was meant to provide clearer guidance to law enforcement in the criminal code to apply the existing standard that has been recognised by the Supreme Court. Because
the same arguments that are being used by you and your government to push Bill C9 to protect people against hate, which on the surface sounds incredibly noble, but these arguments are the same arguments that have led to the United Kingdom having police literally knocking on people's doors over their tweets. So what guarantee can you give Canadians that we are not headed down that very road, especially in the context of other priority areas identified by you and your government, such as the Online Harms Act, which was introduced twice, actually, in the last two parliaments?
This legislation is not identical in kind to the reforms that have been put in place in the UK, and we've actually looked at their experience and see that there are real challenges with how it's played out. For example, we've got a different approach where some jurisdictions around the world have adopted a more blanket glorification that could attract the scrutiny of a liking a Facebook post, for example, and we chose a different path. We instead tried to be very clear that we would not interfere with the charter rights of Canadians to freely express themselves, but at the same time make it easier to lay charges where hate crimes are committed today. To the extent that you think there is a better way to clarify and codify the existing definition, do know that I believe in Parliament, and I don't care which party comes forward with these amendments. If it creates multi-partisan buy-in to codify the test, that's okay by me.
Can you guarantee that if C9 passes, no Canadian will end up being charged because of something they've posted on Twitter or Facebook?
Well, if they commit the crime of willfully promoting hatred against another person.
A crime with a definition that you're changing.
So, but it's possible that they could be convicted for what they willfully promoting hate online today. So certainly I would hope if someone commits a crime in the real world or online that they would face the appropriate criminal penalty if in fact it's captured by the code.
We had in my riding a very disturbing case a few weeks ago where someone had mowed a swastika, a Hakenkreuz I should say, into their lawn and was charged under the existing criminal code definition. They displayed a symbol. It was found to be willfully promoting hate. Law enforcement and the Crown agreed that they could lay that charge. So why is your bill at all necessary when we already have existing powers, which, to Mr. Housefather's point earlier, are simply not being enforced as often as they could be?
This is an important question. I'll answer it very quickly. When you have the willful promotion of hate, the person who's convicted of that could still be convicted, but also of a second charge, the willful promotion of hate using hate symbols, which would attract a greater degree of culpability and potentially a greater penalty, recognizing that the use of hate symbols, when you're willfully promoting hate, can cause greater damage to both the individual and the entirety of the community. So I don't find these points to be inconsistent with one another, but instead that behavior could potentially face an additional charge with a more serious penalty because of the manner in which a person chose to promote hate to cause more damage to an affected community.
Thank you.
In recent times, we've seen attacks on religious institutions, places that are sacred to people of faith who worship. Somewhere where they're supposed to feel safe and secure, they often do not. My question to you, and you've spoken about them being able to safely access these places of worship and community centers as well. How will the new intimidation and obstruction offenses make that a reality?
Part of ensuring Canadians are able to be who they are and to live freely as a citizen of this country is ensuring that they can make choices about how they live their lives day to day, including how they practice their faith or participate in their community. A big part of that is how we gather, celebrate special occasions, and share cultures and traditions with one another. We have seen real-world challenges where groups who may have started out as being innocent protesters have escalated their behavior over the time, where they in fact may physically block people from attending the institutions that allow them to be part of their community, or conduct themselves in a way that is specifically designed to threaten another person from taking part in the activities that take place within those spaces. The spaces in which we gather in a country as diverse and multicultural as Canada are a big part of our cultural identity as a nation. We believe that the spaces that allow communities to fully celebrate their cultures and tradition deserve a degree of protection, and have found, in my view, an elegant solution that allows us to use the federal tools at our disposal to offer protections that allows Canadians to choose for themselves how they spend their days.
And if you can please provide some clarification, there has been misinformation on this bill saying that it bans protests near religious or cultural sites. Can you tell us what this bill can do to protect the right to peaceful protest? Because there has to be a balance.
Certainly, and I find some of the previous questions ironic in this regard. In fact, the argument is somewhat self-defeating. On the one hand, there's a suggestion that free speech is somehow impacted, and in the next breath, you hear the question suggest that in fact it doesn't represent a change in the law. And those two positions cannot possibly be reconciled. When we developed these pieces of legislation, it was a priority to ensure that we didn't have a negative impact on the ability of Canadians to fully enjoy the rights that are protected by the Constitution, including the right to free expression. That's why, for example, when we wanted to deal with symbols of hate, we didn't use a blanket symbols ban, but instead attracted to the criminal behavior of willfully promoting hatred against another Canadian. There is a difference, in my view, from protesting a cause against some initiative, something that's happening in the world that you fundamentally disagree with, and showing up to intimidate a person from practicing their faith, or physically obstructing them from attending their community centers, schools, or places of worship, and understanding where that line exists as between sharing an opinion, broadcasting information, and causing harm, sometimes violent harm, to your fellow Canadians is an important distinction. And I think that this bill does a good job of scoping in behavior that I believe should be criminal, that will offer a greater degree of protections to Canadians to be themselves without infringing the protections to the ability to express yourself freely.
And because we need a good balance between freedom of expression and hatred. So this is one other question I have for you. You chose to have a clear definition of the word hatred. Why was this necessary to include this in the criminal code?
So law enforcement shared with me that a clear definition in the criminal code would help them actually lay charges when they see it. Eliminating ambiguity in the code can change how the laws are applied on the ground, even where they don't necessarily change the substance of the law that underlies the proposed amendments to the code that we're talking about now. In addition, I think it's essential that we recognize that this cultural impact within law enforcement has a real-world effect on the ability of Canadians to seek justice when they are in fact subjected to hate, not just on behalf of themselves, but on behalf of an entire community. So by codifying the principles that were recognized in the Keekster and Whatcott decision, we have an opportunity to send a clear signal to law enforcement that you can in fact enforce these crimes when you see them, and it gives victims of hate crimes a sense that justice will prevail at the end of the day.
Thank you, Ms. Dillon.
Minister, you have said that Canada is not the Wild West. Yet, meanwhile, violent crime is up 55%, sexual assault 76%, extortion has surged. By 330%. How bad does it have to get before you admit that Canada currently appears lawless?
Well, when I look at some of the proposals that we've seen put forward by your party on the House of Commons, it becomes clear that copying and pasting the American approach to criminal laws or to guns would not enhance public safety. The Conservative policy of wanting to legalize assault-style weapons, I think, would make Canada a more dangerous place. The repeated introduction of reforms that certainly violate the Constitution would not make Canada a safer place. And the example given earlier has led to a whole series of behaviors, including recently in the state of Texas, the accidental death by gun violence of a child who was ringing doorbells. It's obvious when you look at some of the proposals that have come forward that we need to have evidence-based policies, and that's what you're going to see with the bill that we put forward in a number of weeks to help change Canada's criminal laws to make our country a safer place.
Minister, many of the offences in C9 restate conduct already captured by existing criminal code. Provisions such as Section 423.1, intimidation, 319, public incitement of hatred, and 264, harassment. Would you agree that the core problem today is uneven enforcement of current laws, not a lack of legislation? What evidence did the department rely on to conclude that additional offences rather than improved enforcement were needed?
I think both are needed. I take your point that enforcement can be improved, and sometimes that will be with more officers on the ground, sometimes it will be with enhanced training, but I do think that we could have better and more equal enforcement of laws that do exist on the books. But I also think, based on the feedback that we've had, not just from law enforcement, but from affected communities, that these changes are necessary because you can recognize the significant difference when a person may assault someone because they have a disagreement that goes sideways versus specifically targeting someone on the basis of their religion or the color of their skin, which doesn't just impact the individual victim, but the entirety of a community. We believe that warrants, though it may be the same behavior in the instant, the effect is not the same. And we think that greater harm that befalls on a community demands a new charge with increased penalties to recognize the severity of the impact of hate crimes on affected
Minister,
communities.
I cede my time to Mr. Weber now.
Thank you. Minister, do you really fail to see how allowing private prosecutions for hate offenses without the consent of the Attorney General could not be weaponized against innocent Canadians by vexatious litigants or political opponents?
I have a lot of faith in the ability of courts to police frivolous and vexatious litigation. You see the opportunity for courts to screen out those kinds of complaints with great frequency. If the committee wishes to take evidence from experts in the space to understand the protections that do exist and where it can be improved, do know that I don't come into this with some preordained outcome. I believe in the work of Parliament. I believe in the ability to take evidence from witnesses and to propose amendments, and would consider each of them in good faith should you wish to move forward with some.
I also have a lot of faith in the courts. The problem is that by the time you get through due process, you may be taken through litigation, your reputation may be ruined, you may incur a lot of legal fees. So this is a major concern for myself. With respect to the new hate offense, the new criminal hate offense can be laid on top of any offense under any federal law. Is that correct? Yes or no?
Yes.
And so an offense under the Elections Act or an offense under the Canada Labour Code may attract criminal prosecution. Someone, for instance, could be charged criminally for non-payment of wages under the Canada Labour Code. Isn't that correct?
I have a hard time understanding how non-payment of wage, if there's a motivation of hatred towards another individual and you commit a crime against that individual because of who they are, it could attach to virtually any charge. The likelihood it would come up in that set of circumstances, I think, would be quite small.
You're basically talking about tacking on criminal charges on what is otherwise civil, non-criminal behavior. This is very concerning. You may have unintended consequences when you combine that with dilution of the definition of hatred, as you're doing, and the possibility for private prosecutions without Attorney General consent. This is a very concerning piece of legislation, Minister. Thank you.
Time's up. Perhaps Mr. Housefather can let him continue, or over. Either way, it's over to you, Anthony, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Minister, I don't know if you had a chance to read the Conservative Party's dissenting opinion in the anti-Semitism study?
Yes.
Did you notice that they didn't dissent on the issue of removing the consent of the Attorney General for prosecutions for hate crimes?
So specifically, when we were discussing which measures to include, the fact that there was multi-partisan support, not just on that item, but some of the others that you referenced, made it clear that there was an appetite amongst parliamentarians in Canada to affect these very specific changes. It seems the Conservative Party has now shifted their position when it comes to those measures that were designed to combat anti-Semitism after the recommendations came out of that report.
Yeah, it's exceptionally surprising to me, in fact. Can I ask a question? One of the things that has been pointed out are the two defenses that have been added for the display of hate symbols and creating hate through the display of hate symbols against an identifiable group. Why are those two defenses that I think are in Section 3.2A and B necessary, Minister? Because some people just believe, right, if a hate symbol is put up, you automatically need to prosecute. Why have you looked at that and found that these defenses are necessary?
Sorry, just which defenses?
The defenses to, for example, related to times that you could display a hate symbol publicly without necessarily being charged with an offense.
Yeah, look, there's many reasons why you may wish to pull out certain uses of these hate symbols. Think of journalistic purposes, academic purposes, but also to prevent free expression. It's really important that we understand at this committee that this is not a blanket symbols ban, but is instead a crime of willfully promoting hate against an identifiable group through the use of hate symbols. This is a very high standard that does not trample on people's free expression rights, but recognizes specific learning opportunities or public interest opportunities where we can openly discuss where these symbols have been used over the course of our history.
Exactly, where it would be context specific.
Absolutely.
For example, you yelling and screaming slogans like globalize the Intifada and carrying terrorist symbols of the organization like Hamas that says globalize the Intifada would be one thing, versus somebody simply putting a symbol in a museum or somebody putting a symbol somewhere to teach somebody about that. So I understand you can't pronounce on any of these, nor can any of us, because it's all context specific, but there is a reason why these exceptions are there.
Yeah, absolutely. And the circumstance you gave would be obviously differentiated from, for example, teaching kids about the Holocaust in our schools and learning the impact that these symbols had that caused an entire nation of people to turn against an entire group of people, leading to millions of Jews being murdered during the Holocaust. These are important parts of our history to understand, but they are not important in terms of our ability to protect the ability to use them to foment hate against others.
Totally agreed. And Minister, you had said something else in public comments that you had made, I believe it was at the press conference, about the idea that the intimidation and obstruction offenses that we can put into the criminal code are different than what municipalities and provinces can do in terms of bubbles around these types of buildings, because they have zoning powers that we do not have. But you had also said that you might be reaching out to municipalities to inform them, such as the Federation of Canadian Municipalities that represents municipalities, what their powers are. Is that something that you're planning on doing?
Yeah, and in fact, we've had significant engagement leading up to the adoption of, or the tabling of this legislation. But we have a continuing conversation with municipalities through FCM and other channels to ensure that they understand where their authorities lie to regulate what behaviors may take place in a space. We have a rather blunt instrument in that regard, in this instance, the criminal code, but we still think it can be deployed to touch hateful criminal behavior, no matter where it takes place, including around our religious institutions, but more broadly in our communities.
And I'll just finish off by saying, Minister, I think this legislation not only sets an example by the federal government, it will make Canadians safer by giving additional tools in the toolbox to police and prosecutors that they've requested, but it also sends a message to provinces and municipalities and police that we believe, and universities, that we believe they should be enforcing their rules and the law. And I thank you for being here today, and thank you for your comments.
Yeah, my pleasure. And obviously, it goes without saying that there's no one level of government that's responsible to combat hate. Federal governments, provincial governments, municipalities, and Canadians more broadly have a responsibility to be better neighbors. We cannot fail one another in this country and expect to overcome the challenges we're facing. It's time that we change our approaches and recognize that we have to speak up to end hate in our communities at every level of society.
Next up, we'll let the minister go. And
Sir, to hear this.
is it a point of order?
It's a procedural point of order, yes.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. We are concerned about the minister's earlier testimony to Mr. Housefather. He seemed to have relayed testimony that would have been taken in camera. Unless the minister can provide any basis for that testimony, I would reserve the right to come back on this issue as a matter of privilege. Unless the minister can provide any basis for that here, right now. And to give you an example, we've got a transcript of the proceedings. Very early on, Mr. Housefather asked the minister, Recommendation 10 stated that the federal government at the federal parliament consider creating a new intimidation offense under the criminal code to more clearly and direct protect entrances to and exits from community buildings and houses of worship and community centers, in addition to existing offenses that might apply when such buildings are being blocked. Mr. Minister, is that in the bill? Minister responds, it is. Minister then says, and I would note that this recommendation had multi-partisan support, including from the Conservative Party. Now, the minister was not part of the Justice Committee and would not be privy to this confidential information unless it was shared by a member of the Justice Committee directly to the minister. This is a serious breach of privilege. It is a serious breach of confidentiality. It is extremely misleading for both Mr. Housefather and the Minister of Justice to conclude, and this was just one example of many examples, where the conclusion drawn was that this was in full support by the Conservative Party. No one mentioned that the Conservative Party filed a dissenting report. And in that dissenting report, there was a strong statement that while the Conservative supported most of the recommendations, there were other recommendations we did not agree with, hence the basis of the dissenting report. But on the issue of this confidential breach of information that was taken in camera, I'd like to hear from the minister as to how he acquired that information.
Thank you, MP Brock. It isn't up to the minister to respond unless he wants to right now. I am more than willing to take this under advisement and review the blues. As you well know, the report was submitted to the House, I suspect with your dissent as well, as is customary, but willing to review it. And should you raise the point of order, you didn't raise the point of privilege, but you obviously reserve the right to, in your discretion, raise that point of privilege at any point in committee and do so at a later date, but perhaps after we've reviewed the evidence. Unless anyone else wants to speak on this point of order, I'll take it under advisement and revert to the committee. Mr.
Housefather. Point of order.
Yes, sorry. He's speaking on the point of order.
Well, the minister was raising his hand to respond directly, and I just didn't think you saw it. That's why I was pointing it out, Chair.
Up to you, Minister, but I saw Mr. Housefather, and then...
Procedure, we had a member who was in the middle of an intervention. I don't want to interrupt.
I defer to you. Up to you, Minister.
Okay. Look, the information that we had was based on the public report. There was a dissenting report. The dissenting report didn't flag opposition to the specific recommendations that we had gone over. This was not, for what it's worth, I've not discussed who voted which way with Mr. Housefather, if that was the implication.
Okay, MP Housefather.
Yeah, the same thing. I did actually specifically refer in my second question to the Conservative Party's dissenting report, in which the Conservative Party dissented on DEI and noted that this was not a recommendation that they said that they dissented on in their report. And I think that is public information because it was in the report. Thank you.
Mr. Chair? Yeah. I got the transcript right in front of me. And with all due respect to Mr. Housefather, the second question that you put to the minister made...
My second round of questions, Mr. Brock. My second round of questions.
Okay. I thought you said the second question.
No, the second round of questions.
Okay, I don't have that transcript in front of me.
Perhaps we do take the time to review it, and we'll get back. The clerk will get back to you with his review of the blues. You're free to look at them yourself. And Mr.
Just for clarity, I have not had any discussions with any members of the previous committee who generated this report about which parties voted which way. My comments were a reflection of the dissenting report, not including opposition to some of these measures. I have not had a single conversation about which parties voted on specific recommendations on the report that we're discussing today, and I just want to make that absolutely clear.
Well noted.